What's up, everybody? Welcome to Will's Personal Development Show. In this episode, I will be covering the 10 mistakes on how Asian parents raise their Asian American children. I think that whether or not you're Asian yourself, you can learn a lot about success through what I'm going to show with you around how Asian immigrant parents raise their Asian American children. There's stuff that they do well, there's stuff that they do not so well, actually really bad, that I only learned by growing up and cross referencing what they taught, how I observed that whole population, which I'm very familiar with, to teach their children, and then cross referencing that with how the world's most successful people were brought up, how they think, and how they view things. There are certain things, hint the education system, that they do partially right but partially wrong. And then there's some things that they do right really well, which you already kind of know. I mean, you probably have some stereotypes about Asian Americans, and you probably think they do really well in school, and there's a reason they're called the model minority. That's a stereotype that is placed on them because they do well in school, they get high upper class jobs, usually as doctors, lawyers, engineers, and they're very agreeable. They don't confront people, they don't really argue, they don't do drugs, they don't drink, they don't smoke. And so these are stereotypes that aren't always true. There's the Asian who has tattoos and rebellious and who dropped out of school and smokes. But generally speaking, on average, there's more truth to that general statement. So with each of these mistakes, I want to kind of point to a good thing first. So the first big mistake that they make, and it is a mistake, I put air quotes because I think it's partially a mistake, but partially like they do some good in it. But that doesn't, forgive them of the mistake that make is that they think long term, but only long term. Now, contrast this to other cultures or people. I see a lot of young people, a lot of social media influencers who are very short term focused, or just people in general. People in college and high school, they're just thinking about partying it up, screwing grades, and just thinking about why haven't they hit it rich by 25 years of age. It's very short-term focus, and if they do hit it rich, which some of these influencers do, they're smoking, they're partying, they're doing hard drugs, cocaine, or if they're not doing drugs, they're just blowing all their money. There's a reason why all these celebrities, Mike Tyson, 50 Cent, are going bankrupt even though they make millions of dollars, because they don't manage their money and they spend more than they make. So it's very short-term focus, and fortunately there's Gary Vaynerchuk, who is very popular now on social media. He has millions of followers, this entrepreneur guy who is influencing so many youngsters and telling them to be more long-term focused. This is something that Asians already understand really well. They're willing to sacrifice for decades until they're 30 or 35, pay off that medical school loan, that tuition loan, and only once they're in their late 30s really start making a good money and starting to enjoy life. Before that, they're sacrificing. Their parents tell them to sacrifice. They get it, they understand it, and they're breaking it down and hustling. The problem with this is that sometimes they hate their jobs, they hate their passion. And this is something that Gary understands really well, how important being passionate about what you do. But for the Asian culture, the parents, they're like, screw passion, just find what makes the money. I don't care if you like being a doctor or lawyer, you're becoming a doctor. In fact, I decided before you were born. Second mistake that Asian parents make is that they pressure their child into a profession. Now, this goes along with hand in hand with what they're passionate about. And I mentioned I was going to do, point to a little bit of good along with the bad. So, I still think this is a big mistake, but the small part, and this doesn't forgive them for it, but the small part that they do well is that they actually kind of instill and influence very subtly to the point where the child believes himself that this is their passion. I've talked to so many Asians my age who are going to be doctors or are in med school now or some similar theme, And it's shocking. It really is shocking, like how 99% of them, I'm like, is this really what you're passionate about? And they're like, yeah, I'm convinced this is. There's nothing to do with my parents. And I'm like, really? Because I mean, I don't say this because don't want to be rude, but in my head, I'm like, really? Because like, there's a ridiculously large percentage of Asians who want to be doctors, and I don't think it's normal. I think it's abnormally high. Are you sure there's no influence there? So I think they've convinced themselves to the point where like some of them will get angry at you if you try and call them out on it. I think it's very ingenious. It's a bit of inception there. But I think in your heart, and this is why I'm not like I took the MCATs. I was on that path. My mom like was destined, or she really wanted to be a doctor because a misdiagnosis caused her grandmother's death, and she was very close with her grandmother. So she felt like it was my job to kind of take that on and fulfill her dream. But like in my heart, like even though I thought I really wanted to do this, you know, in your heart, at some point you're like, man, I really hate studying 50 pages of this textbook every day and memorizing all of it. Your heart knows deep down. So some Asians just kind of close that off. You can't do that. Um, and I think the reason I say that there's some good in the fact that they do this is because I read the book Peak by it, I think his name's I have the book here, Anders Ericsson, and this guy is probably the foremost expert in terms of scientific research on success. I mean, he spent decades studying in person some of the world's top Olympians and so forth. Just released this new book called Peak, and one of the points in it is that like, yeah, sometimes like you can hate what you do. Like he studies some of the world's top spelling bee competitors in the nation, and he found out that like all of them hated practicing. They just hated it, but they did it because they knew they had to win. So I found that fascinating. I think, you know, those are exceptions to the rule. He poses an interesting controversial point, but I think for the most part people still are very passionate. The most successful I've studied are very passionate and love what they do. It's not because they kind of like trick themselves to be like Anders kind of explains in the book. Like he also points to like some pianists and violinists who are the same way. But overall, I mean, if you look at the people who really are winning at life, most of them truly, truly, truly love what they do. I mean, why wouldn't you? Like Will Smith, he has to be an actor and fight supernatural aliens and zombies and robots. That's fun. So number three, the third mistake they make is they expect too much out of their children. I want to pair this with something that they do good, because each time you criticize, you want to praise too. So what they do good is that they actually expect a certain amount from their children. You know, there's other parents I've seen that they don't expect anything, and their child just goes off the rails, and you know, their life just crumbles. I was reading Kevin Hart's book. I can't make this up, and I actually no, it was from an interview he did promoting the book with Patrick Bet David, and he said in it that his older brother had no rules. Like his mom let him do anything, and this guy ended up in jail as like a drug addict and like all this crime and screwed up. Yet Kevin Hart is this like actor comedian who's worth over $150 million supposedly, as reported. So Kevin said that the difference was that after his older brother screwed up, his mom started imposing some rules on him. Now, the problem with Asian immigrant parents is that they impose too many rules, so much so that the child is just so constricted and in a cage that they want to rebel, that they stop listening, that they feel pressured and anxious, and more so than anything, resentful for all that pressure. They expect so much, and you know, it plays on a child's tendency for validation seeking in a parent. But sometimes some Asian parents exploit that too much. It causes burnout, tragedy, pain, or broken relationships with their parents. So that was number